was on November 12th at 7:45 a.m. We were dispatched on a routine news gathering flight from our base at Whiteman Air Park. I'd already done the pre-flight. We checked the weather. All the pre-flight duties were normal. And well, here's a picture of the aftermath. The good part about this is sitting the way it is with his kids on the ground. We took off. Everything was normal. Everything was in the green. We headed off of runway 12. As I departed on the crosswind, turned to the downwind, I was planning to exit on the 45, and as I was exiting on the 45, I felt a slight rise in RPM from the engine. I quickly looked down. In the A-stars, we don't have a twist grip throttle. We've got a power lever that's on the floor. So the best way to do an emergency governor operation is to grow another left arm, a hand on the throttle and a hand on the collector. But outside that, I immediately thought, okay, I'm going to have a high side governor failure. I looked down at the power lever, thinking about how far I'm going to reach down, where I'm actually going to grab it, and how far I'm going to pull it back. Just as the RPM went up, it immediately went down. So hand on the collective, down goes the collective, and into the auto rotation I went. Now I was pretty proud of myself on both of those things because I really was having two emergencies simultaneously. First, I thought I was going to be having a high side governor failure, and then I was definitely having an engine failure. So I was initiating basically the first steps of the emergency procedure for both of those things almost simultaneously. This whole thing happened in about less than a second. So down into the auto rotation I went and started heading to the ground. Just as I'm always trained and hope everybody else is trained, when you start in an auto rotation, you look forward, and that is where you're going to land. Okay, let's diverge from the story a little bit and start talking about forced landings and picking out places in the urban area about where you're going to land. Now my thought is over Los Angeles, the built-up areas of Los Angeles, there are no good places to land. There are just some places, but not as bad as others. You know, if you're out there in the American hinterland over the amber waves of grain, you can just land anywhere, you know, just there's probably nothing in front of you that's going to hurt you. There's three different areas in the urban area that are of concern. You've got the really built-up areas like downtown Los Angeles. You've got the kind of semi-built-up areas where you have big apartment buildings and such, are usually along Wilshire Boulevard, Sherman Way, things like this. And then you've got most of the area, which is residential area. Because we're not Manhattan Island, we don't need to grow up, we've got plenty of room to grow out. So all these residential areas are probably the areas that you're most likely to find yourself going down towards. Now, even the residential areas are quite different from one another. For example, in Hancock Park in Beverly Hills, they've got nice wide streets, big wide lawns, very few people on the street, nobody parked on the street. All of their power lines and their telephone lines are underground, very few obstacles. But I was in Pacoima at the time. Pacoima has very narrow streets. They're jammed with cars. The lawns, there are no lawns. The gates and cinder block walls go right to the sidewalks. And they have, of course, overhead utilities as well. And at 7:48 in the morning, everybody's moving, going to work, so the streets are completely jammed with people. That's what I was looking at, right below me. In my field of vision, I had no place that I really felt that I could go. So I knew that I was going to have to probably extend the glide someplace. Looking over to the right, I saw San Fernando Boulevard. Pretty wide, not too many people on that street at that moment, and there's also the railroad right-of-way that's right there as well. So I started heading for that. Realizing at my minimum rate of descent speed, I'm not going to make that area. I'm going to really have to nose this thing over, get it over to about a 90 knot attitude, pull in some collective, reduce my RPM, and really extend my glide. All right, I had a couple of problems here. First of all, there are 30 to 40 foot power lines between myself and the airport, and I am perpendicular to the runway. I'm heading at Charlie intersection for the people who are familiar with Whiteman Air Park. Just beyond Charlie intersection is the transient ramp And included in that area is Whiteman Airpark's fuel area. So I was going from a bad situation to a worse situation. But with my extended glide, after a couple seconds, it became clear to me that I am going to clear those wires. Now, I wasn't shooting for a point really high above the wires. I was shooting for a point just above the wires. And as I crossed over the wires, I had enough room, it seemed, to make one final 90-degree turn to align myself with the center line of the runway. Problem was, I was still at that high rate of descent and that high speed. But this is something that I held, something that I felt that I needed to hold to get to where I needed to go. As I rolled out in the turn, my photographer who sits on the left side said he was looking straight across at the tower cap, which is about 40 feet high. Now normally, on a minimum rate of descent on an A-star, it's about 70 knots. What you would do is you would start your flare at about 100 feet. It felt really, 100 feet is a perfect altitude to do that. Now here I am going 90 plus. I'm in a 90-degree turn, and I'm at about 40 feet. Coming out of the sky really fast. One quick last drop the collective, try and get some sort of airspeed, or I'm sorry, get some sort of RPM back, pull the nose up, and then try and level it and flare and pull. And it was going to be happening that fast. I got almost all the way through it. I didn't get the nose down far enough as I had hoped, but the thing is, my rate of descent and my speed was so fast at that point, I held that nose up just a little bit because I wanted to keep that nose up a little bit. We hit real hard on the aft portion of the skids. It hit the cross tubes really hard, bam, it felt pretty good, pretty solid. One more bounce and then back level on the skids. All of a sudden, and I was on the center line of the runway, we're going pretty fast, probably 35, 40 knots right now down the runway, and skidding pretty good, but it was bouncing back and forth. I had the collective all the way up to my armpit, of course, after giving it everything right at the end. And all of a sudden, I started doing an uncommanded turn to the right. Gave it full left pedal, didn't do anything. Well, what had happened is that when it slammed down, and I had such low rotor RPM, two of the rotor blades flexed down. You can see the markings on the rotor blades. Flexed down and cut off the aft 1/3 of the tail boom. We skidded around about 160 degrees from my original heading. I was actually going that way. There you can see the tail boom and the tail rotor and the horizontal stab. That was about 100 feet behind me on the runway. And we came to a bouncing stop. I waited till the rotor blades stopped turning, which didn't take long at all. We exited, I stowed the aircraft, we exited and walked away.